When you open Photoshop, you will have an interface like this. The version of Photoshop that I'm using right now is Adobe Photoshop 2021, which is the latest release of Creative Cloud. If you're using an older version of Photoshop, you might have a different interface. The first thing that we need to do is to create a new canvas on which we can paint on. So to create a new canvas, you need to press on this button, Create New. Once we click on this button, you will have an interface like this. Over here, we have preset canvases for photo, print, art and illustration, web, mobile, film and video respectively. You can select either print or illustration based upon your need, and you can proceed further with the illustration or the digital painting. As far as I am concerned, I use a canvas of size 12 by 12 inches of 300 pixels per inch resolution with 16-bit RGB as color mode and color profile as Adobe RGB 1998. And once you click on create button, you will have an interface like this. If you're not having an interface like this, you can go to window, workspace, and then select essentials and then give reset essentials to get an interface like this. Remember that this workspace is completely customizable, meaning you can pull certain things off, close them, and then you can reorganize things the way that you want it effectively. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, I don't use this panel, so I'll just close the tab group. I do use properties, adjustments. I don't use libraries, so I'll right click on this one. I'll close this one. So I'll keep adjustments on top, and then we use layers, channels, and paths. And this is the toolbar panel. Again, this is also customizable. You can reorder this based upon the needs. All you have to do is click and hold, and then you get a edit toolbar option. Over here, you can reorganize your toolbar. I would need a brush panel as well so that I can select the brushes that I have already stored in my machine and use it for the digital painting. Now to draw a rock, what we are going to do is we are going to create a new layer on top of the background layer, and we are going to employ a technique called 3-point perspective. Perspective is something that gives a three-dimensional feeling to a flat image such as a drawing or a painting. Let me draw a box with 3-point perspective, which will act as our boundary for the rock. To draw the box, I am using Kyle's Inkbox Brush Pen 2017 Grid B as my brush. This can be downloaded from Adobe website as Kyle's Mega Pack. I'll rename this layer as 3-point perspective, and this will serve as a reference for our rock. To draw a rock outline, and I'm going to create a new layer, and on this layer I'm going to draw the outline for the rock. I'm renaming the outline layer as rock outline. Now I'm going to create another layer below the rock outline layer where I will paint this surface. Now I don't need this bounding box. All I have to do is to select the color of the rock, which is gray. Click OK, and I want to paint it inside this surface. Either you can go ahead and paint it inside this surface, or you can select this surface alone. How you can do it is by selecting this tool, Magic Wand tool. With the Magic Wand tool selected and the rock outline selected, click on this area. Now if you notice, you will see marching ants on this area, and if you try to do any editing to this area, it won't get affected. So if I select a brush and try to paint on this area, you won't see any changes happening in this area, whereas this area will get affected if I try to paint over it. Now let me undo it. Yeah, but I want the inverse of that. To do that, all I have to do is go to select and then give inverse, or use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl Shift I or Command Shift I for Mac. Now that I have inverted it, I can paint on this area. But painting would be a time consuming process, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the paint bucket tool over here. If you don't see the paint bucket tool over here, click and hold on that area, and then you will get an option to select the paint bucket tool. Or you can use the keyboard shortcut Shift G to cycle between different tools in that tool section alone. Now that I have the paint bucket tool selected and foreground color is gray, I'll select this layer and then click on this area to fill it with gray. Once it has been filled with gray, all I have to do is rename this thing to color, And then now I have to add highlights to this area and then shadow to this area and also texture to the rock. Now let's add texture first and then worry about highlights and shadows later. I'll rename this layer as texture. I'll go select a brush which gives me good texture, which is RSCO Texture Boy, and then RSCO the godfather of grain. And with that brush selected, I'll reset this foreground and background color to black and white just by clicking on this icon over here. Now with black as my foreground color, I'm using the brush and I'm increasing the brush size to 700, and I'm just going to click on different areas so that I get a good texture on the other areas as well. I'll reduce the brush size so that we get different textures in different areas. You can increase and decrease the brush size by using the keyboard shortcuts open curly braces and close curly braces. Open curly braces will decrease the brush size and closed curly braces will increase the brush size. Now let me add a bit of white to the texture as well. I'm creating a new layer and I'm renaming it to texture white so that I get to know which layer contains what. Now I'm resetting the foreground color to white by clicking on this icon over here, and with the same brush and a bit bigger size, let me place it here and there so that we get a bit of white texture on the surface. As I feel the white is getting a bit more dominant, I'll reduce the opacity of the white to say 50%. Now I'm more or less okay with this one, but the texture has gone outside the layer in both the cases, which I don't want. So I'm going to erase those areas. I can either manually erase it by selecting an eraser, or I can control click on this area, which will select only the color area. And similar to what we did earlier, we can inverse the selection by pressing Ctrl Shift I or Command Shift I in Mac and select the texture layer and just press delete. Now once that is done, I can deselect it by pressing the keyboard shortcut Ctrl T. Now we have the base color, we have the texture. Now we have to add highlight to it and then shadow to it and then finalize the image. Now I'm create a new layer and I'll rename this as highlight. Now the foreground color is already white. I'll select the brush. You can either click on this or you can press the keyboard shortcut B, and you can either access the brush settings through this menu over here, or you can just right click and select a brush over here, which is soft round pressure. As you can see, it tapers at the beginning and tapers at the end as well. It is because the software is detecting the pressure that is exerted by the stylus on the surface of the tablet. We don't need that for now, so we can just disable that pressure sensitivity over here in shape dynamics, and then you can turn the control to off, and we'll select a lower brush size, and now we'll turn on the 3-point perspective layer for our reference so that we can add the highlight. So with smaller brush size, opacity to 30 and flow to 50, and then paint over this area so that I get an idea of where the highlight would be. Now I'll turn this 3-point perspective bounding box off. Now this highlight, it looks weird and it has to be merged along with the rest of the image. So to do that, I'm going to select the smudge tool, and I've already selected a preset smudge which came along with the mega pack. Now let's add shadow to this image. Now with the shadow layer selected, I'm going to add shadow by using the brush texture boy godfather of grain, and with foreground color as black, just reset it by pressing this icon over here it'll turn to black. And I'm okay with the brush size. I need to change the opacity to 30 and the flow to 50 so that I can go over the same area again and again. And let's start. Now we have to clean the shadows that has gone outside the border area, so we'll just use the same thing that we did earlier. Control click on the color layer, it'll just select the color area over here. I need to delete the things that are outside the outline, so Control Shift I, it will inverse the selection and go to the respective layers and start deleting. There, we have deleted the things that we need to delete, and to deselect it, Control D or Command D. In Mac, now we have a rock with highlight as well as the shadows. But I feel the shadow could go a little bit up, like these things can be a little bit gradual, so I'll just add one more layer, then add shadow 4 with the brush selected. Just add slightly a bigger size, make it a bit gradual. There, looks better. Yeah. Now what we can do is we can just turn off this outline over here and we can see what is the resultant. It is more or less fine, except that we have a issue over here, and then we have some issues over here as well, which can be rectified if we use a proper tool. What we can do is we can just group everything together into one single layer or one single group. Just select the layers and click on this folder icon to make it as a group, and then click on this one to create a mask. And with the foreground color as black, if I paint on this area on the mask, it will hide whatever imperfection that I would like to hide. So I'll select the brush that I had selected to make the outline, which is Kyle's Inkbox Brush Pen 2017 Grid B. And with that selected, I'll zoom into the area that I want to hide. I'll turn it to the thing, the angle that I'm comfortable with, and reduce the brush size. And then I'll increase the smoothing so that there's a streamlined stroke. Okay, so I'll just paint over this area. Okay, over here the pressure is acting up weird, so I'll just disable the pressure as well. Okay, to rotate the canvas to the direction that you're comfortable in, you can use this tool over here, which is for rotation, which can be accessed by pressing the keyboard shortcut R, and then you can just click and drag on your screen and it will rotate the canvas. If you want to rotate the canvas in increments of 15 degrees, press and hold Shift, rotate the canvas in increments of 15 degrees. Now we have the rock. All we have to do is to add shadow to this entire rock and then finish off the image. So we'll move this layer by selecting the entire group and then pressing on the move icon, which is over here, or using the keyboard shortcut V, move it to somewhere over here and then create another layer at the bottom of the rock. And I'm going to use the texture brush again to create a shadow, and this is not looking like a shadow. So to make it a bit smooth, all I have to do is to go to filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur. Okay, I'll change the Gaussian blur value, radius value to 100. There you go, we have a decent shadow that is falling on the ground. Now let's change the background color. I'll select the hue and saturation, and when the hue and saturation is selected, it will affect all the layers that is directly below the hue and saturation. If you want the hue and saturation to affect only one layer, you have to link the hue and saturation to that particular layer, and that can be done by pressing Alt and then clicking on the division between the layer and the adjustment layer. Now As you can see, there is an arrow mark over here which says that this hue and saturation will affect only the background layer. And with this hue and saturation layer selected, click on colorize and then you can change the color to whatever you want. And the background does look a little bit flat to me, so I'll just add more texture to the background. There you go, a floating rock. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you like the video, please like and share the video and subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit the bell icon for notifications.